You're listening to Now It's the News. I'm Beowulf Rockland. It is a very interesting political season. Democrats are coming back to the House of Representatives as the majority party this week, and it is going to be a fascinating time to be an observer of the American political scene. Someone who has been prominent in national politics and regional politics in California and the San Francisco Bay Area is Congresswoman Jackie Speier. She's joining us today. She is the author of Undaunted, Surviving Jonestown, Summoning Courage, and Fighting Back. Congresswoman Speier, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Beowulf. Great to be with you.
Obviously, there's a lot going on right now, but you have really had an amazing path to where you have come. I know some folks rocket onto the political scene. We can talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez a little bit later, but your path to political power, certainly national political power, I suppose it could be described in the words of Donald Rumsfeld as a long, hard slog. Tell us how you how did you get involved to begin with?
A lot of fits and starts. So I
Yes.
worked on my very first political campaign when I was 16 for then Assemblyman Leo Ryan, and then worked for him as an intern in the state legislature, and then eventually came to staff him in Congress, went back to law school, came back to serve him as his legislative counsel, and it was on that trip to Jonestown, Guyana, when my life had a defining moment, one of many, I might add. But Congressman Ryan was looking into whether or not American citizens were being held against their will in Jonestown, which had become a commune. Started out as a church with the Disciples of Christ, turned into a cult led by the Reverend Jim Jones. And he created this commune in Jonestown in Guyana. And it was there that we went and visited to see whether or not American citizens were being held against their will, many of them constituents of Congressman Ryan. A number of them wanted to leave with us. We took them to the airstrip. Unbeknownst to us, there was a tractor trailer following behind with 7 gunmen. They started shooting. Congressman Ryan was assassinated, shot 45 times. I was shot 5 times. There were members of the press that were shot and killed. And I laid on that airstrip with a huge hole in my leg and broken bone in my arm, and waited for the lights to go out. And when they didn't, I made a commitment that I would spend the rest of my life never taking it for granted and dedicating it to public service. And so in part, that's what the book is about. But again, it's really a story of undergoing lots of challenges in life and finding a way to fight back and to come back.
In addition to it being just an amazing personal struggle for you to go through that, to recover, and then plunge back into the fray of politics, it was a roiling and complicated time in the world of San Francisco Bay Area politics and existence. As you were recovering in the hospital from those wounds, San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk were assassinated, and that was something that you found out about coming out of a hyperbaric chamber. It was just kind of an amazing crucible that time in the late 1970s. What currents do you think were going on to cause something like that to happen?
It was a very black chapter in San Francisco because one event was so dramatic, 900 lives lost, a congressman killed, other people shot and wounded. 10 days later, the mayor is assassinated and one of the supervisors. So it was a very painful time for the Bay Area. I was, as you pointed out, coming out of a hyperbaric chamber treatment because they thought that they were going to have to amputate 1 or 2 of my limbs because I had gas gangrene through my body. And I thought the world was coming to an end. I really, because I was certainly not in any capacity to do anything about it, but it was a time of great remorse and one that I don't think anyone in the Bay Area who was alive then will ever forget.
We're speaking with Congresswoman Jackie Speier. She is the author of Undaunted, Surviving Jonestown, Summoning Courage and Fighting Back. How did what happened at Jonestown change the way you decided to approach your career and the political battles that you fought moving forward from that time?
It was certainly a defining moment. I decided that if I survived, I would spend the rest of my life in public service. But I ended up running for Congressman Ryan's unexpired term at a point when I was still reeling from my own injuries, just out of the hospital. And I decided to run as much for emotional support as anything else. I didn't want to be a victim the rest of my life. And so I ran so I could think outside of myself. And I lost. And unlike Alexandria Ocasio, I did not win. I lost 3 times in public life, once when I was for student body president in high school, and once for Congress and once for lieutenant governor.
Right.
And I will say that each of those moments was really a step to success, because we don't realize that failing is really the first step to succeeding. And it has certainly, all the experiences of my life have driven me to seek public policy solutions to protect the vulnerable and to create equality.
One of the things you talk about, and certainly what you just mentioned plays into this, I think, is it's important to have a thick skin. It's important to know that you're going to be attacked and to be ready for it and to be able to transcend that. We're in a time where a lot of people are hearkening back to and yearning for a greater civility in politics. To what degree, given your personal background in that regard, do you think that's possible?
Well, I think it's incumbent on those of us in public life to try and create a more civil discourse. It is, frankly, a little hard, and I have been one of those who's been outspoken against the president because I find his attack format that he finds so appealing to be very destructive to our country. We need to find the better angels in each of us and look for solutions. And I'm hoping that with the change that's taking place where the Democrats will take control of the House, will create a check on the executive branches, which is what our forefathers really designed for us, that one branch would be able to check and balance the other branch. And that has not been the case in the last 2 years. And so there's been a lot of chaos and paralysis that hopefully now will end, and we will find ways of creating win-win situations for the president and for those of us who feel that what he has done in the last 2 years has been very counterproductive.
We're speaking with California Congresswoman Jackie Speier. She is the author of Undaunted, Surviving Jonestown, Summoning Courage and Fighting Back. As you mentioned, House Democrats are going to come back this week as the majority party in that chamber. I think they're most likely rightfully going to be holding a lot of hearings to investigate President Trump and his administration. What, though, are the top policy priorities for House Democrats now that they're in control, and how much do you think you can get done, given the fact that the House is under Democratic control, but the Senate and the White House are under Republican control? Well,
you make a very important point that we only have control over one house, but I do think in the 10 months or so, and I think we have a very short window in which to redefine what we as Democrats will contribute to the body politic in this country. We've got to re-engage with Middle America. We've got to make sure that they appreciate that we're there to fight for them, and that can be best acquired by making sure we do an infrastructure bill, which the president says he supports, that will create really good paying jobs and provide for our crumbling infrastructure, which has been neglected for decades. The Affordable Care Act, even though there was attempts 65 times to repeal it by the Republican majority is here to stay, and we need to protect it, make sure that pre-existing conditions will never be used as a way to discriminate, and to bring the cost of prescription drugs down, because they are way too expensive.
There are many in the Democratic Party who are advocating Medicare for all. Where do you come down on that?
Well, I actually support Medicare for all. I think that it has to be phased in. I think persons who are 50 years of age and over should be able to instantly be able to buy Medicare. They are often in that window between 50 and 65 where they are losing jobs or are unable for whatever reasons to pick up insurance through the Affordable Care Act, and this will allow them to buy into the Medicare system. And I think over a period of time we can phase it. It's not cheap, but there are many parts of the Medicare system which could be controlled in terms of costs that I think we need to look at as well.
Right.
And if we could get back to the book, I just want to point out that Undaunted is about finding solutions to lots of different problems. And I speak in the book not only of my personal challenges, but about issues that I've taken up that have finally succeeded. In part, it's just true grit. We've got to have the grit to keep moving forward.
I agree, and I think that certainly applies to whenever you're facing something in the way of a political decision, which is difficult in terms of pulling the levers and driving it through, but is clearly something that the majority of the American people want. And I'll just say also that in defense of expense in terms of health care, it may not be cheap on a national level, but I will tell you, if you add up all the premiums that are out there nationally, including my own, it ain't cheap now. So that's something
right.
That's certainly something that needs to change. And if we're going to pay for it one way or another, let's have something that actually works. We are speaking with Congresswoman Jackie Speier. She's the author of Undaunted, Surviving Jonestown, Summoning Courage, and Fighting Back. There are a lot of tough decisions that need to be made. One of them is the idea of whether President Trump should be impeached or not. Some say that it's best not to do it because it'll give Republicans something to run against, and the GOP-controlled Senate won't, or is not likely to convict him at this point anyway. Others say that he's guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors and should be impeached regardless of the politics. What do you think about the situation? It's not an easy one, and there's not necessarily a clear-cut answer. What do you think should happen?
I think we have to, one, wait for the Mueller investigation to be completed and have the benefit of his report. The House Intelligence Committee needs to reopen its investigation of the Russian intervention in our election and look very specifically at the relationship between Donald Trump and the Russians over a long period of time, which I think is what has driven much of his decision-making as it relates to Russia and other persons who are, I think, more interested in feathering his nest, and he is more interested in promoting their interests over the interests of the United States. And I think we need to really delve down into that. And then let the facts take us where they may. If impeachment is appropriate, whether we tactically have the ability to try him and get a conviction in the Senate would be not as relevant as making sure we're doing what is right under the Constitution. But again, we've got to wait for the evidence to be presented to us.
Fair enough. We've been speaking with Congresswoman Jackie Speier. She's the author of Undaunted. Alone, in terms of your involvement in the Jonestown Massacre, is an incredibly moving account. It really is riveting, and the struggle which comes out of that for you personally is an important one. And I want to thank you for your career and your service in California politics. I know in the state assembly and Senate, and on a national level in the Congress. And looking forward to seeing more of that fine work as you come back as part of the majority this year in 2019. Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Undaunted, Surviving Jonestown, Summoning Courage, and Fighting Back. Thank you so much for being with us on Now It's the News.
With you, Bevo.